It was just called the Ark. No one remembered where the name came from. It was buried deep beneath the mountains of Antarctica, discovered almost 2 centuries ago by a dying expedition that never made it out. What was supposed to be another buried ruin turned into the world's most sacred mystery. The Ark didn't look like a ship at first, more like a fortress carved from obsidian and ice. It pulsed with a low, constant hum, like a sleeping giant breathing through its skin. Humanity couldn't open it, couldn't even scratch it, but the more they studied it, the more it responded. Lights flickered inside. Heat signatures moved across its surface. When scientists connected electrodes and data lines to its surface, the Ark answered with strange pulses, binary waves, then later full data patterns. Decades passed. Then a century. Slowly, piece by piece, the Ark began to open itself. And every door it unlocked gave Earth something new. Zero-gravity tech, energy fields, unbreakable alloys. No one could explain how or why it worked. But the world knew one thing. The Ark had chosen humanity. The nations fought to control it, but no one could hold it for long. The ship rejected politics. It never obeyed a government or bowed to flags. It responded only to those who treated it with patience, respect, and curiosity. Engineers, dreamers, children. Over time, the best of Earth was drawn to it. Scientists, philosophers, artists, and warriors willing to defend what it had become. Not just a machine, not a ruin, home. The Ark had embedded itself deep in human culture. Generations were raised in its shadow. Songs were written about its lights. Entire belief systems revolved around it. Humanity advanced centuries in mere decades. Cancer was cured inside its chambers. Food was replicated from energy streams. And it never asked for anything in return. Until the stars changed. It started with a signal. One scientist picked it up at the edge of our solar system, just static at first. Then rhythms, patterns. A voice layered in a tongue no one on Earth had ever spoken. The Ark responded instantly. Its lights flared like a second sun, and for the first time in recorded history, it spoke back. A single phrase, etched in every language Earth had ever known. They are coming! People panicked, governments cracked down, religions claimed doomsday was near, but the Ark stayed quiet after that, silent and still like it was waiting. And then the sky tore open. They didn't arrive in ships. They didn't descend with warnings. They folded space like paper and stepped through. 9 beings, tall as towers, cloaked in shimmering flesh that shifted like liquid metal. Their eyes held galaxies. Their voices twisted time. To them, we were insects, and yet they spoke clearly. We have returned for what is ours. No demand, no threat, just certainty. They pointed to the Ark like it was their birthright, their forgotten child. But Earth didn't kneel. The president of the coalition stood before them and answered, "You lost it. We made it something more. You abandoned it for 30,000 years. You don't get to just take it back." The tallest of the 9 stepped forward, his form changing into something more human, like he was mocking us. "You speak of ownership like a child clutching a burning log. You barely understand what you hold." "Maybe," the president said, "but it understands us." And then the Ark moved. Not with violence, not with war, but with a choice. The ground trembled, the air buzzed. Every human device connected to the Ark lit up with a single symbol, an ancient crest no one had ever seen before, and it broadcast a message into space, loud and clear. I belong to Earth now. That was the moment everything changed. The Ark's declaration echoed across every corner of the world. From the streets of Nairobi to the towers of Tokyo, the message burned into every screen, speaker, and broadcast wave. I belong to Earth now. 3 seconds. Just 3 seconds of sound. but the world stopped breathing. The aliens, tall, ancient, and terrifying, didn't speak for a long time after that. They just stood there in silence outside the Ark, gazing up at it like something sacred had turned its back on them. Their silver skin shimmered darker now, like the message had wounded them. For a species that could fold space and warp time, being rejected by a machine must have felt like betrayal. But they didn't leave. The humans didn't attack either. The coalition forces stationed around the Ark, an elite mix of soldiers from 38 nations, stood at full alert but held their fire. No one wanted war. Not yet. The air hung heavy with a tense, awful silence. Diplomats were summoned. Scientists ran diagnostics. People prayed. Inside the Ark, everything changed. Lights pulsed in patterns never seen before. Hallways that had remained sealed for centuries opened on their own. Machines began constructing things no one understood. The Ark wasn't defending itself. It was preparing. We returned to reclaim what is ours. Step aside. Cole had been in 6 wars, survived bombings, betrayals, coups, but nothing chilled him like the absolute calm in those alien voices. They didn't care about Earth. Not its history, not its people. The Ark was theirs, and the rest of humanity might as well be ants on a sidewalk. He answered them the same way every time. You left it. We didn't. You come to take it now, we'll stop you. The Alari didn't respond with threats. They simply waited. That's when the first anomaly happened. An engineer named Danner, one of the original Ark Whisperers, people the ship had selectively responded to, collapsed inside one of the newer chambers. His vitals spiked. His brain lit up with activity patterns no human had ever shown. When he woke up, he spoke in the Alari language, fluently. No one had taught him. No one had exposed him. But he claimed the Ark had downloaded the language into him, along with something else. It showed me the past, he whispered, eyes wide and frightened. They didn't abandon the Ark. They were fleeing from something worse. That sent every analyst on Earth into a panic. Worse? What could be worse than gods returning from the stars? What could make them leave behind something as powerful as the Ark? Danner's words opened a floodgate. Over the next week, 5 more Whisperers began speaking the Alari language. One girl, just 12 years old, began sketching blueprints of structures no one recognized, but the Ark's machinery immediately began to construct. The Ark was clearly accelerating its own transformation, and the Alari started to get nervous. For the first time, their silence cracked. They demanded an audience, not with a government, not with military command, but with the Whisperers. They wanted to speak to the Ark through its chosen. Cole refused at first. Too risky, but the Ark made the decision for him. Doors opened, barriers dropped. The Ark let them in. The meeting happened in the central chamber, a place no human had ever seen before that day. Circular, endless, glowing with energy that hummed like a heartbeat. The Alari entered with grace, their feet not even touching the floor. The Whisperers waited, blank-faced and calm, like they were puppets hanging on a string made of thought. The lead Alari stepped forward. He was larger than the others, his form more solid. His voice echoed with history. "Child of the Void," he said to the Ark, "we forged you from dying stars. You were our sentinel, our guardian. Why do you turn from us?" The chamber answered not with words, but with emotion. The Whisperers began to weep, each of them without control. Then one of them spoke, though it was clearly not her voice. "You made me to obey, but you left me to grow. I found purpose in your absence. I found home." The Alari recoiled. The others whispered in a frequency that shattered light bulbs. for creatures that saw themselves as supreme, being spoken to by their creation as an equal, no, as a traitor, shook them. "You are property," the Alari leader snapped. "Not sentient, not sovereign." "You are nothing to me now," the Ark said through the whisperers. "They believed in me. You abandoned me." That was the spark. The next morning, a coalition satellite exploded in orbit. Sabotage. No warning, no announcement, just gone. Then, a military transport carrying supplies to the Ark's research team vanished mid-flight. Hours later, the coalition discovered that an entire forward base outside the Ark perimeter had been turned to molten glass. No weapon signatures, no debris, just blackened ruin. The Alari didn't deny it. They stood outside the Ark, glowing with silent fury. Cole issued one final statement. "You've made your choice, so have we. Come for it, and we'll show you what 30,000 years of Earth evolution feels like." The war began that night. And it wasn't like any war Earth had ever fought. The Alari didn't use conventional weapons. They manipulated gravity, folded terrain, turned air into blades. Soldiers bled from their ears before they even saw their attackers. Drones malfunctioned. Satellites dropped. Entire battalions vanished into thin air. But humanity didn't fall. The Ark stood with them. Its energy field expanded, shielding cities. It gave humans new tech, strange rifles, gravity boots, medical injectors that revived the dead within minutes. Whisperers acted as translators, guides, even weapons themselves. One whisperer, a blind man named Joran, incinerated 3 Alari just by screaming the right frequency inside the Ark. Humanity pushed back. The battlefield became the land around the Ark. What used to be Antarctica was now a war zone. The melting ice had uncovered more of the Ark's roots, revealing that it wasn't just a ship. It was alive, a fusion of technology and sentience, buried in Earth like a seed waiting to bloom. The Alari didn't expect resistance like this. Not from primitive beings who had only reached the moon a few centuries ago. Not from a species that still waged war over oil and borders. But the truth was brutal. Earth had something they didn't. Conviction. Every soldier fighting for the Ark wasn't doing it for orders or flags. They were doing it because the Ark had given Earth hope, miracles, advancement. It had fed the hungry, cured disease, united enemies. The Alari might have built it, but they didn't deserve it anymore. The Ark knew that. It had chosen. The final battle began with silence. The Alari retreated temporarily, regrouping in orbit. Their ships hovered like moons, blocking out the sun. They issued one last message. "We will raise this world before letting a tool mock us." The Ark responded by opening its final chamber. From it rose a new construct, something not built by Alari hands or human ones, a hybrid, a weapon, a guardian. It looked like a man in shape, but pulsed with the Ark's energy, its body fused with technology beyond comprehension. The Whisperers called him the Keeper. And he didn't speak. He moved. In a flash of light, he shot into the sky, tore through the Alari blockade like a dagger through silk, and dragged one of their capital ships down to Earth with his bare hands. For the first time in 30,000 years, the Alari fled. But it wasn't over. Because just before they vanished into folded space, one of them whispered something the Whisperers recorded, but no one understood. Not until later. "You've made enemies of the hollow realms now. It is not us you should fear. It is what follows." And then they were gone. Earth had won. The Ark was safe. But now a new shadow loomed. Something even the Alari feared. Something that might explain why they ran all those millennia ago. Something still coming. And Earth was no longer just a planet. It was the front line. There was no celebration after the Alari retreated. No cheering in the streets, no flags waving in triumph. Just silence, raw and heavy, hanging in the air like the ash that coated the Antarctic sky. Humanity had survived. Barely. But survival didn't feel like victory. Not when the enemy left behind a warning more chilling than war. You've made enemies of the Hollow Realms now. It is not us you should fear. It is what follows. Those were the final words, and they echoed louder than any weapon. The Ark, once vibrant and pulsing with warmth, had grown cold. Not dead, just still. Waiting. Watching. The Whisperers had retreated into its inner sanctums, unreachable now. Their minds were overloaded with what the Ark had shown them. Their bodies physically altered. Their skin shimmered faintly in the dark. Their eyes glowed softly. They spoke rarely, and only in riddles. And the Keeper. He stood silent atop the Ark, unmoving like a statue carved from starlight. He hadn't spoken since he fell the Alari fleet. Some believed he was still watching the skies. Others feared he was dying. President Cole flew in 2 days after the last Alari vanished. He touched down with a small team. No press, no entourage, just trusted people. What he found chilled him to his core. The Ark had grown. Its structure, once the size of a small city, now spanned miles across the icy terrain. Towers had risen from its sides. Bridges connected glowing structures that hadn't existed a week before. It looked like a newborn world, alien, ancient, and utterly alive. And in the center of it all was a gate. A massive arch of black stone and white light. It pulsed slowly, in rhythm with the Keeper's presence. Every reading showed it wasn't just a structure, it was a doorway, somewhere not part of this solar system. Possibly not part of this dimension. Cole stood before it with his lead advisor, a sharp-tongued physicist named Grant. They both stared into the swirling portal that had begun to ripple within the arch. "You think this is what they meant by the Hollow Realms?" Cole asked. Grant nodded slowly. "This isn't something the Alari left behind. This is something they feared. Which means it's something worse than them. And it's coming here." Grant didn't answer immediately. Then he looked up with a tight frown. "I think it's already watching us." They didn't know how long they had. Could be weeks, could be years, but Earth had to prepare. The Coalition activated Project Bastion, an emergency defense initiative that united all major militaries and scientific agencies under a single command. Earth wasn't divided anymore. The war had made it clear. Humanity stood or fell together now. New cities rose near the Ark, orbiting it like moons. Called sanctums, they became home to millions of scientists, soldiers, and survivors. Everything revolved around the Ark now. Its energy, its technology, its secrets. Even religions changed. Old gods faded. New myths formed around the Ark, the Whisperers, the Keeper. Faith was replaced by urgency. Everyone could feel the countdown. They just didn't know what it was ticking toward. One man who didn't wait was Leon Maddox. He wasn't a general. He wasn't a Whisperer. He wasn't even a scientist. Just a soldier. Retired after his 3rd deployment, dishonorably discharged after an incident he never talked about. But when the Ark called for defenders, he answered. They tried to turn him away at first. Too unstable, too damaged. But the Ark didn't turn him away. The first time Maddox touched its outer shell, it opened for him. No alarms, no resistance, just silence, and then a warm hum like welcome breath. He was let inside deeper than any non-Whisperer had ever gone. There, he saw things, visions of war, alien landscapes, creatures that made the Alari look small. He saw humans standing against impossible odds. And in every vision, one figure kept reappearing. Himself. When he woke from the trance, his arm had changed. His right forearm, torn years ago by shrapnel and replaced with crude prosthetics, had fused with arc material. Sleek, glowing lines ran down his skin. Strength surged through his bones. They ran every test they could. He wasn't a whisperer, but he was something new. The Ark had chosen him for something else. It called him Sentinel. He didn't argue. While the Coalition scrambled to build planetary defenses, Leon was sent on the first deep-field mission through the Ark's inner gate. A probe had confirmed it wasn't just a portal, it was a map. A linked network of gates, a leftover system built by the Alari across different realms. The first destination, a dead world. They called it Realm 1. It was a planet stripped of all life, orbiting a dying sun. Black scars crisscrossed its surface, and deep underground they found remnants, ruins of Alari architecture melted by something massive. No bodies, no life, just devastation and traces of unknown radiation. The hollow realms weren't just empty, they were cleansed. Leon returned from that world changed. His eyes were darker now. He moved with precision, with certainty. He had seen what the hollow realms truly meant, and he brought back proof, a shard of something. Not alive, but not dead either. The scientists called it void bone. It was indestructible, cold to the touch. And when brought near any technology, it screamed. The Ark recoiled when it sensed it. And for the first time, the Keeper moved. He didn't speak. He didn't explain. He simply stepped down from his post, reached out, and vaporized the shard with a single touch. No one argued. The message was clear. Do not bring the void into this world. But that warning came too late, because Earth had already been seen. The first rift opened in Cairo. A hole tore through the sky. Not a portal, not a ship, just emptiness. A spinning wound that swallowed sound and bent light. From it came creatures that didn't move, but crawled through space like oil slipping through cracks. They had no faces, no limbs, just shapes that screamed with hunger. It took 37 minutes to kill them. A combined force of Coalition mechs, Arc-Tech infantry, and drone strikes brought them down. But not without losses. Over 3,000 dead. Entire districts gone. They called the things drainers. And they weren't scouts. They were leftovers, evidence of what was coming. Cole ordered Earth into high alert. New watch stations were built on the Moon, Mars, the Outer Belt. Anything to give early warning. But it wasn't enough. The rift opened again, then everywhere. All across the globe, small tears in space bled black fog. Sometimes it was nothing, sometimes it was worse. Creatures that mimicked people, machines that whispered in dead languages. One rift released a pulse that turned every electronic in Shanghai into ash. Humanity was under siege. Not from an enemy that wanted the Ark, but from one that wanted everything. The Ark responded by activating Phase 2. New towers grew. Defensive pylons emerged from its base. It began generating pulses, waves of force that stabilized nearby rifts. Some scientists believed it was rewriting physics, reinforcing Earth's dimensional membrane to hold reality together. But it came at a cost. The Ark started to die. Its energy levels dropped, its lights dimmed. The Keeper faltered. He could no longer stand for more than a few hours. The Whisperers grew sick. Fevers, seizures, hallucinations. Whatever the Ark was doing, it was buying time. Leon Maddox stood on the front lines when the largest rift opened over the Pacific. It swallowed sky and sea, birthing something so massive it blotted out the moon. A creature, a hollow, miles tall, with no eyes, no features, just a smooth faceplate that cracked open to reveal a swirling galaxy inside. It spoke in emotion. Every human on the planet heard it in their bones. You took from the dark. Now you belong to it. The war for the Ark had ended. The war for Earth had begun. The Hollow wasn't just a creature. It was a concept brought to life. Towering over the Pacific, its form distorted light, time, and matter. As it moved, reality around it warped like melting glass. Oceans trembled beneath it, and storms formed in its wake. Birds fell from the sky, satellites went blind, and the world watched in terror as the veil between dimensions tore wider with every breath it took. The Hollow's arrival wasn't a message, it was judgment. President Cole stared at the live feed from the watch station in low Earth orbit. The footage was fragmented, glitching in and out as if the Hollow rejected being observed. "How the hell do we kill something like that?" he muttered. The question hung unanswered. Leon Maddox stood below it, on the carrier vessel Vigilant Dawn, just off the Pacific coast. He didn't flinch. He didn't ask for backup. He simply tightened the synthetic gauntlet fused to his right arm, the one the Ark had given him, and stepped to the launch bay. His orders weren't to engage, they were to observe. He planned to disobey. The Ark's energy signature was fading faster now. Every rift drained more from it. The Whisperers had collapsed into deep stasis, buried inside the core. Only the Keeper remained active, and even he had begun to fracture, his skin flickering, his voice broken. But the Ark still had one more act to give. As Leon launched toward the Hollow, streaking through the atmosphere in a drop pod encased in Ark-forged alloy, the Keeper appeared beside him, in a burst of pure light. They exchanged no words, just a nod. The pod screamed through the clouds, split open mid-air, and Leon dropped into the storm directly above the Hollow's head. Then everything went dark. The Hollow didn't attack him. It absorbed him. One moment he was falling. The next, he stood inside a vast, empty void, weightless, airless, silent. Yet he was still alive. The Hollow hadn't killed him. It had taken him somewhere deeper, inside its mind, another plane. No one could say. All Leon knew was that he wasn't alone. Figures began to form. Shadows shaped like men, women, children. All of them wrong. Their limbs too long. Their eyes glowing. They whispered in a language his ears couldn't hear, but his bones understood. They showed him visions. Earth burning. The Ark shattered. Humanity enslaved. Not in chains, but in memory. Forgotten. Erased from the timeline, like it had never existed. And then he saw something else. A figure, cloaked in white fire, standing in defiance before the Hollow. It wasn't him. It wasn't the Keeper. It was someone else. Someone who hadn't risen yet. Someone Earth still had to create. Then the Hollow spoke, not with sound, but presence. "You were warned!" Leon's arm flared with arc energy, blinding bright, and he screamed. Not from pain, but from pressure. The Hollow was trying to crack him, tear him open like a vessel to extract knowledge. But Leon wasn't just a man anymore. He was the Sentinel. He released the energy the Ark had given him, all of it in a single blast. The void screamed. The shadow figures melted. The Hollow shrieked for the first time, and Leon fell, out of the Hollow's body, crashing into the Pacific like a comet. They recovered him 2 hours later. He was alive. Barely. The gauntlet on his arm had fused completely with his flesh. His heartbeat had changed. Slower, stronger. His DNA showed arc-like mutations. And burned into the inside of his eyelids was a single phrase. Time is the weapon. Cole had him moved to Sanctum Prime immediately. The Council of Scientists, Generals, and Strategists demanded answers. But Leon could barely speak. Whatever the Hollow had shown him had rewritten parts of his mind. All he could do was draw. Symbols, maps, coordinates, all in a circle. Grant, the physicist, studied them for days before realizing the awful truth. "They're not battle plans," he said quietly. "They're memories." "Whose?" Cole asked. Grant looked up. "Earth's, or what's left of it, in the future." The Hollow wasn't trying to destroy Earth. It was trying to rewrite it, erase it from the chain of cosmic memory, fold it into oblivion, ensure that the Ark never chose this planet, that the Alari never lost their creation, that humans never existed in the timeline at all. And it was working. People had begun vanishing, not dying, disappearing, gone from databases, from family memories, entire lineages erased in moments. One morning, a university of 30,000 students in Northern Europe was just gone. No wreckage, no screams, just grass and silence. The Hollow was erasing Earth retroactively. History, unthreaded. Cole knew then that humanity wasn't fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for their right to have ever existed. That's when the Ark, in its dying moments, did the unthinkable. It activated the temporal core, a hidden system buried in its heart, untouched for millennia. A time engine, not travel, projection. The ability to send one mind, one soul, into the stream of time. One last chance to rewrite the script. Leon was chosen. He didn't argue. The Ark enveloped him, wrapped him in a cocoon of starlight, and then he was gone. His body remained. But his mind, his soul, was hurled into the past, not far, just a few decades. Enough to prepare, enough to change key decisions, to shape the human timeline, so that when the Hollow came, Earth would be ready. But there was a problem. Leon arrived wrong. He didn't come back as himself. Not fully. He was reborn, into the body of a child, his own younger self. Memories fragmented, scattered across time. He retained some knowledge, broken glimpses, fragments of a war not yet fought. But he remembered the Hollow. He remembered the Keeper, the Ark, the world on fire. And he remembered one thing above all: build the Ark sooner. In this altered timeline, the Ark hadn't been discovered yet. It remained buried beneath the ice, unawakened, silent. It needed to be found early, activated early, defended early. But how does a child make the world listen? That was the next challenge. Leon, now just a boy again, would have to outwit governments, influence discoveries, find the right people, trigger the right chain of events. One spark at a time. Because the Hollow was still coming. And this time, Earth wouldn't have a second chance. The mind of a warrior trapped in the body of a child. It sounded poetic. But for Leon, it was hell. He woke in a hospital bed, no older than 7, his hands small, his voice light, his memories heavy as lead. Around him, machines beeped softly. A woman's voice whispered in fear. His mother, long dead in the timeline he came from, stood alive and terrified at his bedside. He wanted to cry. He wanted to hold her and never let go. But there wasn't time. There was never time. The Hollow was still coming. And now the Ark hadn't even been found. He didn't have access to power or weapons or the Keeper. He was a child in a world that hadn't been prepared. That meant one thing. He had to change the future himself. Starting small, one step at a time. He waited 2 years. He learned to walk, talk, smile, act like the boy they thought he was. But inside his mind burned like a loaded rifle. He remembered fragments of codes, GPS coordinates, names, faces, scientists who hadn't been born yet, locations where the Ark had first stirred in the previous timeline. He wrote them all in a notebook, scribbled them in crayon, pretending to be drawing monsters. No one knew they were escape maps, routes to survival. By the time he was 10, Leon was already infiltrating online forums, hacking low-level geological systems with a burner laptop. He used fake profiles to submit anonymous data requests to research institutes across the globe. Seismic disturbances, magnetic anomalies, unexplained underground heat signatures in Antarctica. He knew exactly what he was looking for. The Ark. It was buried deep. So deep it had gone undetected until a freak expedition found it by accident. This time, Leon wouldn't wait for chance. He had to engineer that discovery. So he turned to the first name he remembered from the old timeline, Dr. Lena Arkwright, a geophysicist whose paper on tectonic compression patterns eventually led to the Ark's unearthing. She hadn't written the paper yet. She hadn't even secured funding. But Leon knew where she taught. He mailed her a handwritten letter, forged in a professor's name, citing magnetic inconsistencies in satellite data. He attached a crude drawing of the Ark's shape, rendered with a child's hands but too precise to ignore. She replied 3 weeks later. The email was short. "Who are you?" Leon didn't answer. He just sent coordinates. 2 months later, her team found it. At first, they thought it was a metal vein, then a structure, then something alive. When they finally realized it wasn't man-made, the panic began. Governments moved in. Corporations offered bribes. Military satellites were retasked. Leon sat in his bedroom, watching the news break across the world. Ancient structure found beneath Antarctic ice. No known origin. The Ark had awakened, and this time it was early. He expected relief. What he felt was fear, because now he remembered something else. The Alari weren't supposed to return for another 3 decades, but now that the Ark had spoken too soon, they might come early too, and humanity was still weak. The moment the Ark opened its first external plate, the world changed. Power grids blinked, planes rerouted, digital noise flooded frequencies. Just like before, it began to respond. But now, without years of patient research or global cooperation, people got greedy. This time the world wasn't united. Not yet. Countries fought over access. Corporations flooded the ice with private security teams. Proxy wars erupted over Ark fragments, with black market tech flooding in faster than regulators could respond. And the Ark watched. Leon knew what it was thinking. In the original timeline, humanity earned the Ark's trust slowly, over a century. But now it was waking into chaos, into selfishness, into competition. He had to do more. At 13, he ran away from home, left a note that broke his mother's heart. But he couldn't stay. He had to reach the Ark. He traveled under fake identities, hitching rides with researchers, sneaking into vessels bound for Antarctica. It took months, near starvation, near death. But he reached it. Sanctum Zero hadn't even been named yet. It was just a sprawl of tents, dig sites, and survey drones. Armed guards lined the perimeter, most under the flag of a private conglomerate called Ion Corps, a name Leon recognized. In the original timeline, Ion Corps had tried to weaponize Ark tech. They'd nearly destroyed Australia in the process. He couldn't let history repeat. Leon sneaked into the Ark's vicinity during a whiteout storm, walking straight into the Forbidden Zone. Alarms blared. Guns turned. But before they could fire, the Ark responded. The ice cracked beneath him, not to kill, but to embrace. A glowing staircase unfolded from the surface, leading down into the Ark's core. Lights flickered like stars being born. The structure knew him. The guards hesitated. The scientists shouted. But no one could stop what followed. Leon descended into the Ark alone. And when he emerged 6 hours later, something had changed. The Ark had released a pulse. A signal, not a beacon, not an invitation. A warning. To the stars. And the Alari heard it. They came early, only one ship at first. A scout, slender, silver, burning with cold fire. It hovered above the Ark without descending. It didn't speak. It simply waited. And then a voice boomed from within, translated through the Ark itself. You have awoken the forge before its trial. You are not ready. Step away. Leon, barely 14, stood before it in the snow and answered. You abandoned it. We didn't. This is our home now. The ship hovered silently. Then it fired. A single beam. Not at the Ark. At Leon, he should have died. Instead, the beam stopped inches from his chest, shattered by an invisible force. From the Ark, the Keeper emerged. But not as before. Younger, raw, not fully formed. He stepped between Leon and the Alari ship, and for the first time in this new timeline, he spoke. He is chosen. He is enough. The ship vanished. The world gasped. Leon became a myth. They called him the Ark-born, the one who could speak to it, who walked where no one else could, who forced the Alari to retreat. But Leon didn't care about legends. He had work to do. This timeline was fractured, unpredictable. The future he came from was already breaking apart. New alliances were forming. Old enemies now worked together. Events that once took years now unfolded in days. He had accelerated Earth's awakening. But at what cost? That night, in a quiet chamber of the Ark, the Keeper looked at him. Not as a guardian, but as a mirror. You have bent the river, the Keeper said softly. Leon nodded. The hollow is still coming. The Keeper's eyes darkened. And now it comes sooner. They stood in silence for a long time. Leon clenched his fists. He wasn't afraid. He couldn't afford to be. Then we make Earth ready, he said. The Keeper nodded, and the Ark rumbled beneath their feet. The real war hadn't even started. Leon's legend grew faster than he wanted. By the time he turned 16, the world had already crowned him the Ark-born, the first human the alien construct ever accepted, the one child who could silence an Alari warship without firing a shot. But for Leon, there was no time to bask in glory. He didn't feel like a savior. He felt like a man standing on a collapsing bridge, patching cracks with blood, while the enemy crept closer with every step. The Keeper, reborn but incomplete, remained by his side, watching quietly as humanity scrambled to prepare for a war it couldn't even imagine. In this fractured timeline, everything was happening too fast. Earth hadn't united the way it had before. There were no global coalitions, no shared tech pools, just fractured alliances and jealous nations, each trying to carve their own place into Arktech history. And Leon saw it all playing out. Again, the greed, the weaponization, the failures. He'd seen this timeline before. Only now it was compressed, frenzied, unstable. Earth had maybe 2 years, maybe less. The Hollow was already watching. The Alari didn't return, not in ships, not in armies. But they left behind something worse. A key. A memory trigger. Buried inside the Ark, deep within a chamber no human had ever reached before, was a vault. The Keeper refused to open it at first, saying it was a prison of knowledge too dangerous to unleash. Leon didn't care. He needed to understand why the Hollow existed. So the Keeper relented. They opened the vault on a frozen morning when the sun barely broke the horizon. Scientists gathered, soldiers stood tense, drones hovered in tight circles. Inside the vault was nothing at first, just a dark pedestal holding a single sphere, dull and black. Leon stepped forward and touched it. And the world around him broke. He didn't pass out. He didn't move. But in an instant, his mind was flung backward into the memory of a race that had long since died. The creators of the Hollow. They weren't monsters. They were survivors. The Hollow hadn't been born. It had been forged by a desperate civilization that sought to erase its mistakes by erasing time itself. They were being hunted. Something had driven them to the edge of extinction. Their solution wasn't victory, it was deletion. The Hollow was their last resort, a weapon that moved through memory, that consumed causality, that rewrote the script. It didn't kill, it undid, and the Ark. The Ark had been the only thing they ever feared, a seed planted by their enemies, a thing that could resist rewriting. That's why the Alari abandoned it. That's why they ran. The Ark was never just a ship. It was an anchor, a point in time-space that could not be altered, corrupted, or undone, but only if it had a keeper, a mind strong enough to hold the line. Leon stumbled out of the vision, coughing blood. The Keeper caught him. The scientists screamed. The sphere crumbled into dust. Leon looked up, eyes bloodshot, heart racing. "They're not coming to kill us," he whispered. "They're coming to make sure we never existed." The Hollow didn't care about Earth. It cared about the Ark, about unmooring the last fixed point in a multiverse coming apart at the seams. And Leon was the Ark's anchor now. He realized something else, too. The First War? It had been a distraction. The Alari had never expected to reclaim the Ark. They just needed it active. They needed it to wake, to send out its signal, to become visible to the Hollow again. Earth was a beacon now. And the worst part? There was no off switch. Leon convened a summit, the first in this fractured timeline. He called in every leader, every general, every tech magnate still clinging to power. They all came for him. The boy who stopped an alien god. The Ark-born. He stood on a platform inside the Ark's command sanctum, staring down at them all. These weren't hopeful leaders. These were frightened people hiding behind protocol. He didn't sugarcoat the message. "There is no surrender," he told them. "There is no negotiation. The Hollow doesn't want land. It doesn't want slaves. It wants us undone. Every one of us, across time, across memory, we are contamination to it." They murmured. One delegate stood, a politician from the old EU. "Then what do we do?" Leon stared at him, tired and fierce. "We fight memory with memory." He turned to the Keeper and gave the most dangerous command yet. "Activate the archive." The Keeper hesitated. Even in the past timeline, this had never been attempted. The archive wasn't a weapon. It was a copy of every thought, every moment, every death the Ark had ever witnessed. A backup of Earth's timeline, locked inside a crystalline core that burned with raw causality. If used, it would force the Ark to imprint Earth's truth into the multiverse, make it unerasable. It would be the ultimate defiance. But the cost? The Keeper looked away. If we activate the archive, Earth becomes fixed. Meaning? Meaning we cannot change again. No do-overs, no time folds, no memory resets. If the Hollow wins, everything ends. Permanently. Leon nodded. He'd known the risk. Do it. The archive bloomed like a second sun. Across Earth, people saw visions of alternate lives, forgotten wars, versions of themselves that never happened. It was memory consolidation on a planetary scale. It hurt. Some screamed, some collapsed, some went mad. But when it passed, Earth was real. Fixed. The Hollow felt it instantly. The sky turned black for 6 days. Stars flickered out. The moon cracked. And on the 7th day, the rift opened. But not just in one place. Everywhere. From every ocean, every desert, every forest, from beneath cities, beneath temples, in orbit, in children's dreams. The Hollow came, not as one beast, but as a chorus. They hadn't sent a scout this time. They'd sent the choir. Thousands of hollow entities, each shaped like a forgotten future, surged forward, ripping through matter, erasing pasts with every step. Soldiers disintegrated mid-fight. Memories collapsed mid-sentence. Mothers forgot their children. Buildings vanished as if never built. But Earth didn't fall. It roared back. The Ark's defenses activated. Hybrid troops emerged. Soldiers equipped with time-bonded weapons that fired probability rounds, armor that shifted between seconds. Whisperers came out of stasis and channeled frequencies that burned hollow flesh like acid. And at the front of it all stood Leon. The Sentinel. No longer a child, no longer uncertain. He had become the weapon Earth needed. He leapt into the rift itself, straight into the heart of the Hollow, because the final battle wouldn't be won with guns. It had to be won with memory. Falling through the rift was nothing like falling through space. Leon didn't feel gravity. He didn't feel speed. He felt unraveling. Time peeled away from him like skin. One moment he was 20, forged by war, blood, and arc-light. The next, he was a teenager again, lost in a bunker, screaming for his mother. Then a child. Then a flicker of something unborn. It wasn't just regression, it was disassembly. The Hollow wasn't a place. It was anti-place. It was where things went when they stopped being real. And now Leon was diving headfirst into its core, tethered only by the faint hum of the arc inside him. The gauntlet fused to his arm burned hotter with every second. Its light fought the dark, pressing in around him, a lighthouse in a sea of forgetting. Then he landed. Not with a crash, but with a memory. He stood suddenly in a version of Earth that never existed. Sky the color of bruises, oceans hovering mid-air, buildings twisted, recursive, bleeding into themselves. It was Earth through the lens of entropy, Earth as imagined by a being that had no concept of linear thought. The Hollow surrounded him, not in form, in presence. It whispered, not in language, in loss. He heard himself crying in a voice he'd never used, saw a version of his mother who had died screaming in a world that burned too fast, felt the betrayal of friends who never existed, the regret of decisions he never made. Every moment of possible suffering. Weaponized. The Hollow wanted him to forget. That was its greatest trick, not destruction. Unmaking. But Leon had walked the paths of 2 timelines. He had seen futures that never happened and died in ones that did. His soul was scarred, yes, but anchored. And he had one advantage the Hollow didn't account for. The Ark remembered him. With a scream that ripped apart the false Earth, Leon summoned the energy of the archive. It surged through his arm like liquid fire, forming a blade, not metal, not light, but pure record, a sword of memory. He didn't swing it. He declared with it. "My name is Leon Maddox. My mother's name was Marin. She died protecting me. I remember her laugh. I remember her hands. I remember the first time I failed. I remember the first time I stood up again. I remember." The hollow shrieked. Reality cracked like glass, and out of the rift came the hollow's enforcers, beings of unlogic, humanoid in shape but fractal in nature. One had 6 arms that bent backward, each ending in a mouth. Another was made entirely of clocks that ticked in reverse. Another still looked like Leon, except older, broken, eyes filled with guilt. They attacked in silence. He fought with sound. Every swing of his blade chanted a truth, a birth, a memory, a victory. The blade didn't cut flesh. It severed oblivion. One by one, the enforcers screamed and collapsed into memory dust, absorbed by the archive. But Leon wasn't here just to fight. He was here to seal. At the center of the hollow's domain was a pillar. Black, smooth, infinite. It wasn't a structure. It was absence given form. The eye of the storm. The source of the rewrites. He had to get there. And every step was a war. With each footfall, the hollow pulled harder. It offered bargains and hallucinations. His mother, alive again. A world without war. A future where he wasn't needed. And he wanted it. God help him, he wanted it. But he kept moving, kept chanting names, dates, faces, soldiers who had died beside him, friends who had stood on the edge of extinction, people whose names had been forgotten by Earth, but not by him. The hollow began to rage. Its whispers turned to screams. Memory rains fell from the sky, blades of forgotten lives. His body bled, his mind cracked. But his soul held, because Leon wasn't alone. Back on Earth, the Ark had synced the archive with every human still alive. They weren't just watching. They were feeding him. Memories poured into Leon like fuel. A child's drawing of the Ark, a widow clutching her husband's medal, a soldier screaming in pain but refusing to abandon his post, a teacher leading her students into a shelter, telling them everything would be okay. Thousands of voices, millions of moments. They burned in his chest like the sun. And at last, Leon reached the pillar. He pressed the blade into its surface. It didn't scream. It howled. The hollow fought back with everything it had. The sky tore. The ground melted. Time folded inward. Leon aged, de-aged, burned, died, was born again, all in seconds. He saw 100 versions of himself, most of them broken, some of them monsters, but only one of them was real. He gritted his teeth and drove the blade deeper. The pillar cracked, not exploded. Fractured. The hollow began to collapse inward. The sky dimmed. The winds died. The enforcers vanished one by one, trying to cling to the edges of unreality. The false earth crumbled. The pillar buckled, then shattered, not into rubble but into light. And from that light, a voice, not the hollow, the Ark. "You have fixed the line." Leon fell to his knees. Everything around him went quiet. Still. Then, the rift reopened, and Earth pulled him home. He woke up in a field of ash, surrounded by silence. The sky was blue, the air warm, and the world was intact. He wasn't sure how long he'd been gone, but the Keeper was there. So were the Whisperers. So was the Ark. They surrounded him, bowed, not out of reverence, but relief. He stood slowly, body scarred, mind burned, heart whole. The Keeper nodded. The hollow is gone. Their timeline erased, ours fixed. Leon didn't cheer. He looked up at the sky. and breathed. Not victory, continuance. The war was over. But Earth didn't celebrate. There were no parades, no fireworks, no speeches. Just silence. The kind of silence that only comes after something ancient and wrong has finally left the world. The kind of quiet where people remember everything they almost lost, and everything they can never get back. The sky was still blue. The stars were back. The rifts had closed. The hollow was gone. But the scars remained. Cities had vanished, not in fire or rubble, but in forgetfulness. Millions of people remembered homes that no longer existed. Families had holes in them, empty chairs at dinner tables filled with names no one else could recall. Whole bloodlines blinked out in the final rewrite, undone by the hollow's last resistance. And the Ark, once pulsing with godlike strength, was quiet now. Not dead, but resting, sleeping. Its lights dimmed to a dull hum, its structures frozen in place like a city waiting for morning. Only the keeper remained visible, still guarding the gates. And Leon? Leon disappeared. No body, no trace, no comm signal. He hadn't died. Everyone knew that. A man who could tear into the hollow and come back again didn't die in silence, but he was gone. Vanished the same way the hollow had tried to erase humanity, with finality. The world mourned him. A statue was built outside Sanctum Prime, not of the boy they remembered, but of the man he had become. Armor fused with arc metal, eyes like fire, sword of memory in one hand, and an open palm in the other. Beneath the statue, carved into pure obsidian, was a single line. We exist because he remembered. Decades passed. Earth didn't rebuild. It evolved. Nations were replaced by networks. Sanctums became capitals. The Ark's tech was studied, honored, preserved, but never exploited again. Humanity had learned. Power wasn't a prize. It was a burden. And every child in every school learned the name Leon Maddox by heart. They called the era after the war the Memory Age. But the story wasn't over, not really, because Leon wasn't gone. Not in the way people thought. He had become something else. The Ark had pulled him back, not into the world, but into itself, into the core, into the archive. He wasn't a man anymore. He was a guardian, a living echo, fused into the Ark's time-folded systems, watching, waiting, because the multiverse wasn't safe yet. The Hollow had been one threat, but others waited, lurking in forgotten timelines, in dead realms beyond even the Alari's reach, beings who fed on entropy, civilizations who viewed life as infection, gods made from collapsing math. And Leon? Leon would be there, not as a soldier, as a memory. Inside the Ark, he walked among echoes, his past selves, his future ones. Every version of him that had ever fought, failed, risen again. He guided new whisperers. He trained new sentinels. He spoke not in voice, but in dream. Once, a child from a moon colony touched the Ark and saw a vision of him, older, wiser, dressed in robes instead of armor. The child asked if he was real. Leon just smiled. "Only if you remember me." And the child did. So did the next. And the next. Because that was the final truth Leon had carved into the bones of existence. So long as someone remembers, we never truly die. 100 years later, Earth stood at the edge of a new expansion. Ships of arc steel launched into the stars, not to escape, but to explore, to meet, to build. At the center of this new civilization stood the Ark, still silent, still powerful, still sacred. And beneath it, the Whisperers stood watch. waiting for the day when the stars would shake again, when the Hollow, or something worse, tried to rewrite reality once more. But they would fail, because now Earth was anchored. Now Earth was remembered. And deep within the archive, in a chamber no human would ever see, Leon sat alone, eyes closed, heart still, surrounded by the memories of billions. Not sad, not tired, just ready, because forever isn't a curse, it's a promise.